President Macron called a snap election because he feared France was becoming ungovernable. But have the results now exacerbated the situation? Hello and welcome to a special edition of Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady and we're here in Paris. Catastrophic losses for Emmanuel Macron's party in the EU vote last month led to him calling a snap election, which he hoped would see off the threat from the far-right National Rally. But in a bizarre twist, a left-wing group has actually won. So what now for the rather fractured politics of France?
Anger in Paris. As demonstrators clash with police following a shock parliamentary election that's left France with more questions than answers. Even though the far-right National Rally and its allies received a plurality of votes after the second round, winning over 10 million, they still came in third with 142 seats.
France will be totally blocked with three groups that have more or less the same influence in the National Assembly. We're losing one more year of unregulated immigration, one more year of losing purchasing power, one more year of a blowing up of insecurity in our country.
289 seats out of 577 are required to secure an absolute majority. But the French government is on the brink of political uncertainty since the second round left no single party with a clear majority. Now weeks or even possibly months of negotiations are expected to forge a viable government. French President Emmanuel Macron's strategy succeeded in blocking Marine Le Pen's National Rally. But the results ushered in a shock victory for the left-wing New Popular Front, an alliance including socialists, Greens, communists and Jean-Luc Mélenchon's France Unbold.
This evening, the National Rally is far from having the absolute majority the commentators predicted scarcely a week ago. In fact, it's totally the opposite. It's an immense relief for an overwhelming majority of people in our country.
Following the defeat of Macron's centrist bloc, Prime Minister Gabriel Attal announced that he will resign. As a replacement, Mélenchon is being talked about as a top candidate for Prime Minister, but its candidacy is controversial within the leftist coalition. The process of forming a coalition is complex but underway, with each party competing for influence in a divided parliament.
Well, let's meet our guests. Nabila Ramdani is a French Algerian broadcaster and journalist. She's also the author of Fixing France: How to Repair a Broken Republic. Nacira Guenif is Professor of Sociology and Anthropology, and that's at University Paris 8. And Jacques Reland is a Senior Research Fellow at the Global Policy Institute. Nabila, I'll come to you first. A lot of people portrayed this as a battle between the far left and the far right in French politics, but ultimately there's been one real winner. It's Emmanuel Macron.
Yes, I think in the short term, Emmanuel Macron's gamble no doubt paid off ultimately. He came to power in 2017, pledging to be a firewall against the far right, and he ironically decided to time a parliamentary election in France on the back of a very successful win by the National Rally at the European parliamentary elections. Now, there was no need to test their power domestically, not least of all as the country is heading towards what is meant to be a celebration of humanity and a glorious, sporting extravaganza. But I think Emmanuel Macron also wanted to test his own popularity. He knows he's an incumbent president, he's unpopular, and he probably wanted to boost his popularity, but more crucially, prove that even though the National Rally was doing well at the EU, which is irrelevant as far as domestic politics is concerned, they wouldn't have a chance to get anywhere near power at home. In actual facts, that allowed him, with no clear majority emerging out of these elections, to avoid the scenario of a so-called cohabitation, which is a peculiarity of the French Fifth Constitution, which forces effectively a president to work with a government that he might well despise. It also allows him to form his own government and indeed choose his own prime minister, because the powers of the Constitution allow him to do that. He ultimately is the power broker. In the long term, however, having a hung parliament means that he will introduce months, if not years, certainly until 2027 for the next presidential elections, a period of chaos, certainly instability, not just on the economic front, but also socially, where social problems will keep brewing. And dare I say, it also vindicates in the way the National Rally. Their vote share has increased massively, but also their seats, the number of seats in Parliament. They had 89 seats at the last Parliament, and they are predicted to gain over 140 this time around. So this will certainly be used by the National Rally as a springboard for Marine Le Pen to challenge for the presidency in 2027, when President Macron will have to step down, because only 2 terms are allowed for a president constitutionally.
Nacira, what do you make of Macron's gamble?
Yeah, I think he was overusing and abusing the powers that he has in the Fifth Republic. And this is something that has been doing since the beginning. I mean, I think that this man is more about exerting power than about benefiting to the country. And actually he hasn't for the past 7 years. And this gamble, this last gamble, which has to do with the election and changing the chamber, is something that has gone far too, it is outrageous in many ways, because it is about using the far right in such ways that it becomes the new force. And he has done everything that he could in order to make sure that he would be against this new force, but he has built it. And the fact that he and his party and his people have said that there's an equivalence between the far right and the far left is something that not only is not true, it's a lie, but it's also very dangerous, because now that we have a majority that comes from the left, and not the far left, but from the left, what happens next? Then it is all about trying to make sure that the left will not gain any traction in order to exert power in France. And this is what he really has at stake. It's not so much the far right, which is something really very dangerous for the country. It's about preventing the left from gaining traction and being in power for the next 2 years or 3 years.
Jacques, give us your impression of Macron's thinking over the last few weeks.
When Macron dissolved, he did not have any need to do it. There was no reason, because nobody could understand the National Assembly. He claimed that he wanted to make the situation clearer. There's only one thing which is clear now, and in that sense, I can say it's been quite successful. The French don't want the National Rally to be in power. They don't want their ideas to prevail in France. I think that came out loud and clear. As far as the political situation, before he complained, he didn't have a majority, enough of a majority to carry out his reforms, although it did not prevent him from carrying out pensions reform and an immigration reform, which were actually part of the reason why many people were angry with him. And so, what's the result now? We had before a party with a relative majority able to govern. Now we are in an ungovernable situation. Just clear as mud. We don't know what the next government will be. You have yes, we know we have 3 blocks. 3 blocks, more or less equal in terms of seats, but not that much difference. And I think maybe it is a cunning plan, in my opinion, because before, what Macron tried to do with this en même temps movement, catching left and right, was to create a party, a catch-all party, and that did not work. So now the situation is, maybe instead we'll have national unity, a government of coalition, comprising the Republicans, Democratic Republic, who did not ally with National Front, and on the left we'll have the Socialist Party, the Glucksmann wing, and the Greens collaborating. We are very sensible, centrist politicians, and from then on maybe France can change and become a country where parties negotiate instead of confronting each other.
Nabila, just want to make the point that Marine Le Pen, for whatever anyone thinks of her, there are still 10, 11 million people in France who vote for her party.
Well, there has clearly been some upset amongst the National Rally and certainly amongst some of the 13 million people who voted for her. But it also came as a huge relief, it has to be said, for those who joined the New Popular Front to set up this Republican front to defeat the far right and to lock them out of power. It has to be said that Emmanuel Macron, whatever you think of him, he's a savvy politician. He worked very tactically between the two rounds, making sure that his own coalition together worked with even what he perceives as ideological enemies on the far left, the likes of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, for example. And this has paid off tactically as far as he's concerned. Having said that, I think that he's created an awfully complicated situation as far as the French political landscape is concerned. I think he undoubtedly achieved what he's set to do, but he left more confusion than clarity.
Nacira, I thought it was an interesting use of language by Marine Le Pen. She said, our victory is delayed. She's looking longer term here, isn't she, to 2027 and her own run for the presidency?
I mean, she's looking very long, much longer. This party was founded by former torturers during the Algerian War and was formed by people who were in favor of Nazi occupation in 1972. So this is where she comes from. She's the daughter of her father, who was a torturer in Algeria, and she knows that, of course, this would take time, but they only have to wait for 3 extra years. If you compare that to the half century of the existence of this party, it amounts to nothing. So for her, of course, it's not a problem to wait for 3 more years. And actually, I think that as someone who is so keen on exerting power, she's also satisfied by the fact that she won't need Bardella in order to access power. She will be the one running for the presidential election in 2027. And of course, if she wins, it will be her win, not of her father, not of her family, and not even of her party. This is what she is expecting.
I just want to make a point. I saw a French flag here in Place de la République on Sunday night, and it said, France is a tissue of migrants. That was the phrase that was written on the French flag. What would a national rally France look like for people who are from migrant communities?
Well, first of all, I think, it might have been one of the most divisive elections in decades, but what emerged clearly out of the 2 rounds is that in the first round, as so often happens, you have people letting off steam and expressing huge frustration, mainly at their government, venting anti-establishment sentiments. But when the second round comes, then the consciences kicks in, and people ultimately decided that France, which is the birthplace of human rights and indeed enlightenment, isn't the place to elect the first far-right prime minister since the Second World War, since the Vichy government that collaborated with Nazi Germany. But there's no doubt whatsoever that the party remains fundamentally steeped in its foundation values. Founding members were literally fighting for the Waffen-SS and swore an oath to Adolf Hitler. And as was reminded on the program, it's also steeped in nostalgia over the loss of France's colonial empire, and especially Algeria. And this hasn't gone away. France is an ex-colonial power that collaborated with Nazi Germany, and these values remain at the core of the National Rally, inherited from the National Front. And you add to that resentment against the establishment that looks after the super rich, those who run France's very successful multinational. And you have millions of people who feel left behind, not just socially, but also economically. And these are the ones who tend to vote for the extremes. It's a very French form of nihilism in a way.
Nacira, what are your concerns about a French future if there were a National Rally government ever, or Marine Le Pen as president?
Well, that would be a nightmare, just to put it bluntly. Of course, this is something that everybody wants to avoid, because then it would be a racist state. We already have an Islamophobia and racist laws that have been implemented by this government, by Macron, because he plays with the fire all the time about race and racism. And this is also part of his savvy way of running the state and the country. But this would become something that would be completely pervasive. It would be at all levels of the state. They would change the way the administration would function, and they would make it the national preference, as they say, as a national rule. And they would probably also put center stage what has been called the great replacement, state policies that would be meant to make sure that the multiplicity and the tissues of migrants that you were mentioning, the fabric of migrants that has become the real France, they would make sure that this doesn't happen. They would make sure that those people are being harassed, are being stripped from their fundamental rights, and that they would have to face a France that is against any kind of expression of Islam, for example, in the public sphere, but also in the private sphere. They would monitor everything that happens to minorities and racialized minorities. This is what we are facing in 27. And Marine Le Pen might appear as someone who is not fundamentally or to the core racist, but actually she just needs to have the votes of the racists. Even if she presents herself as someone who is more keen on cats than on racism, she has gained the racist vote for decades now, and she will go on until she wins.
Jacques, that's an interesting point. Every year she's putting on 1 million votes. That's a fact?
That's been the case, yes. It's been numbers of, I think, I haven't got the figures in front of me, I think they've doubled in the last, I would say maybe even the last 2 years, the number of votes, the number of people voting has increased a lot. But I still think that she's reached a glass ceiling. I think it's politics fiction to think that Le Pen will be the next French president. I think she's disqualified now. They've shown, really, this campaign showed what they were about, an anti-Republican, and it was quite amazing. The fact that you had, in my neighborhood, there's many right-wing people, business, bourgeois class, and they were asked to vote for a socialist candidate, which is their cup of tea, or even in some cases for Mélenchon candidate, which is for them anathema, but still did it. It's amazing is the fact that the Republican front worked, and I think that's a good thing for France, that there's this, many people were predicting, Republican front, the opposition to National Rally, pretending that the devil and so on doesn't work anymore. Many pundits were saying that. And in the end, when he saw the result, it worked fantastically well. So I wouldn't be that pessimistic about...
Let's not forget that the Republican front functioned because of the leftists in France. It was not because of the partisans of Macron. It was certainly not because of the right. The people who really reassured the Republican front are the people on the left and on the far left. They are the ones who decided to vote against the far right and against the fascists. And this is something that has to be stressed, because then you would think, it's the whole society that is against the National Front. No, it's just one part of because the right is about to decide whether they would go a little further to the far right. And the ones that really stood up against and in the election by giving up their position, giving up in the second round, are the ones who were accused on being too far to the left, and who were accused also to be a danger to the nation. And this is what Macron said about the people who voted for his candidates and for the candidates of the right.
Nabila, I want to talk about the left. Jean-Luc Mélenchon. He's often described as France's answer to Jeremy Corbyn from the UK. How do you think he'll be feeling looking at the results? Because on the face of it, he has won.
Well, absolutely, not least because they've achieved the highest number of seats in the French Assembly, French National Assembly, falling short of securing an absolute majority, meaning that they won't be able to form a government or indeed put forward a prime minister. Nonetheless, it didn't stop him from, in his victory speech, as it were, calling Macron and saying, well, you have to acknowledge our victory and you have to compose with us to form a new government. The party, my alliance, is ready to govern. So it's undeniably a powerful force, not least because the left managed to unite for the first time in a long time. And some commentators have suggested that it might be that the infighting between that coalition might start right away. It might fall apart. So let's see how long it will hold, and certainly let's wait and see if it will hold until the next big election, which is 2027 for the presidential elections.
Nacira, I'm struck by that very famous quote from Charles de Gaulle years ago. How do you govern a country that has so many different types of cheese? They can't even agree on cheese. Has France become ungovernable?
Well, actually, that's interesting that he was so concerned with that, because the Fifth Republic that was built for him made sure that you could govern France whatever kind of situation you were in. So what they didn't foresee in '58, you know, in the midst of the Algerian War for independence, is that at some point there will be pluralism in France, and that the parties wouldn't be the last way of exerting power, and especially of expressing political opinions. So this is happening now. A lot of people do not trust parties anymore for many reasons, good or bad. And so now you have people who are in favor of changes, of progressism, but do not rely on parties. And this is what is interesting about the coalition to the left of the new Labour, the new Popular Party, is that they want to make sure that they do not have to comply with the way the parties function in order to get changes happening. And this is what is going to be interesting to look at, is the fact that they would not just leave it to the parties. A lot of people want to still get involved in the way the parliament is going to function. They want to put pressure in order to get the changes that they voted for in this last election. And this will be maybe a change in the way France was seen by this old man who was le Général de Gaulle.
Jacques, just come to you on that point. Is France now ungovernable?
In the current practice, yes, but that could be a change. And that's yesterday, Gabriel Attal, who ran a remarkable campaign, to be said, and is now, Macron has lost status, Attal has risen. That's for sure. He's seen by the militants as the main man, reliable and so on. He said that now we can move to, when you study law in France, constitutional law, the question you do at the first year, at the end of your constitutional law is the Fifth Republic a presidential or a parliamentary regime? Actually, it can be, it's always worded differently, but basically that's what it is. And it can be. It depends on the rapport de force, on the political forces. And there's a possibility that you could restart, if there's no dominant party, maybe you could have a coalition. And that's the dream. That was the dream of Attal and on many others. But are the parties going to play ball? Otherwise, it would be possible to have a great coalition of people working together. And if you add to that, to the mix, proportional representation, then it's the end of the Fifth. People are fed up with the Fifth Republic, where based on each time a man, not a woman. Once a woman nearly got in, but no, she was quite far from achieving it. But they're fed up. They always expect great things from the leader. And then after 1 year, they're disappointed, they hate it, and all the incumbents are discharged, are elected
Final
at the
comment,
next election.
Nabila, just very, very briefly. Emmanuel Macron, he's strengthened his position really now, hasn't he?
He has, but as Jacques was saying quite rightly, I think the fundamental question that was brought to the fore during these parliamentary elections is a constitutional one. It is far too easy to have one individual stamp his mark on every field of national life in France and rule in a manner that is quite undemocratic. And I think that's why you hear more and more people calling for a new iteration of France, a new iteration of the French Republic, to the extent of moving to the Sixth Republic.
Nabila, Nacira and Jacques, thank you all so much for your insight and analysis. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World, and if you like what you see there, please do hit that subscribe button. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the Roundtable team here in Paris, thank you for watching and goodbye.